Mark Twain, the legendary American icon, a brilliant entrepreneur, a venture capitalist, and a globally celebrated novelist of humor, was once bedridden, entirely crushed by a severe, suffocating depression. He was a man who had seen the world, yet he found himself drowning in the overwhelming exhaustion of existence. But then, while lying in that dark room, he opened a book. Suddenly, he was as thrilled as a little child. He devoured its pages in a single, mesmerizing breath, completely forgetting to eat or sleep. This book wasn't a masterpiece about a famous historical figure, a billionaire, or a stoic philosopher. It was a novel about the growing pains of an 11-year-old girl named Anne. The book was Anne of Green Gables. She was an orphan. She had bright red hair, a face completely covered in freckles, and a life defined by absolute poverty, destitution, and rejection. Yet, despite fate playing a cruel joke on her, she managed to become the happiest person in the world. She lived like a miniature sun, illuminating her own path and relentlessly warming the cold hearts of everyone around her. She has inspired countless generations of readers. If you ever feel like your life is just too boring, too exhausting, or too predictable, you need to hear her story to realize one undeniable truth. The dullness of your life has a root cause. A famous writer once said, "Sometimes human beings can be ignorant, but they absolutely cannot be boring." The most crucial thing in a person's life is to live interestingly. What is the point of living a life as dry and monotonous as the color of a desert for decades? People with an interesting soul possess an incredibly powerful inner strength. Even when their eyes are filled with sorrow, they can pierce through the dense fog to find poetry and distant horizons hidden within the wreckage. No matter how many ups and downs they face, they can still sing. Even in their twilight years, they can smile and say, "I don't worry about getting old. When I am old, I will still be adorable." Can you feel it? The terrifying, beautiful power of being interesting. Scientists are often utterly shocked when observing celestial bodies, wormholes, and particles in the vast universe. The world beneath an astronomical telescope or a microscope is endlessly magical. For example, many people assume that every single drop of water looks exactly like any other drop of water. But German scientists observed that inside every single drop of water, there is a unique pattern. Every single one is entirely distinct. From this perspective, the Creator is profoundly interesting. Everything in the universe inherently carries a spark of fascination, and we, as human beings, were built the exact same way. But how are we actually living today? Gradually, as the years pile on, many people have entirely lost or failed to cultivate this interesting nature. There are tens of thousands of physically beautiful people in this world, but those with a genuinely interesting soul make up only a tiny fraction. The truth is, there are far too few interesting souls left. To be more precise, living interestingly has become a rare superpower for modern people. The story of Anne growing up at Green Gables is the ultimate healing journey. In this story, there are no villains. There are only quirky people. There are no terrible tragedies. There are only strange, beautiful occurrences. You might worry that a story lacking intense personal conflicts and explosive drama would be boring, but it is the exact opposite. Its brilliance will make it impossible for you to stop watching. By the end of this journey, you will realize that all the difficulties, the suffering, and the suffocating boredom in your own life can be fundamentally altered and healed by cultivating an interesting soul. No matter what life throws at you, your only job is to remain fascinating. Everything else is already arranged. So let's dive into the profound psychological cure hidden inside Lucy Maud Montgomery's masterpiece, Anne of Green Gables.
If you want an interesting life, half of it must belong to the mountains, the rivers, the lakes, and the seas. On Prince Edward Island, there are two eccentric elderly people, Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert. They live at Green Gables. They are siblings who never married, have no children, are completely withdrawn, and notoriously difficult to approach. For them, life at Green Gables is like a pool of stagnant water. For decades, it has been dead silent. Every single day, Marilla meticulously tends to the firewood, the oil, the salt, and the daily chores. For over 60 years, she has rarely stepped foot outside her immediate surroundings. She eats on time, sleeps on schedule, weaves fabric, sews clothes, and herds the cattle and sheep. She has absolutely no hobbies. She has no friends to chat with. Then comes Anne, the orphan sent from the asylum to be adopted. She has barely arrived, yet she is instantly mesmerized by the sheer, overwhelming beauty of the Green Gables landscape. But Marilla immediately warns her, "Don't look at those useless things." When the cherry tree in the yard blooms white as snow, Anne enthusiastically names it the Snow Queen. But Marilla simply snaps with annoyance. The fruit of that tree is small and bitter, and it attracts a lot of bugs. In reality, life is simply a mirror reflecting your own inner landscape. If you are dull, your life will be boring. If you spend your entire life endlessly busy just securing the most basic survival, you will ultimately neglect your own soul. An interesting soul is one that even in the darkest, most desperate circumstances maintains an absolute sense of wonder toward life. It discovers the fascinating things the universe has freely provided, and it aggressively enjoys them. Anne is a child abandoned by fate time and again. Her parents died when she was 3. She was taken in out of pity by the Thomas family, only to be discarded when tragedy struck. She was rescued from starvation by the Hammond family, where she exhaustingly cared for their 8 children, only to be sent to the orphanage anyway. When she finally rejoices at being adopted by the siblings at Green Gables, she arrives only to face being kicked out immediately because she's an ugly red-haired girl. They wanted a boy to help on the farm. The messenger made a mistake. Yet even when she knows she has to return to the cold, miserable orphanage the very next morning, Anne still allows herself to fully enjoy the breathtaking scenery. She sits by the window, staring at the birch tree for a long time. She looks at the mountains. She watches the distant stream. She gives the cherry tree a beautiful name and talks to it as if it were a friend. Anne says, "If you've decided to have a good time, you can always have a good time." You will find that people like Marilla are everywhere in real life. But people who possess an interesting soul, who love and deeply immerse themselves in nature like Anne, are incredibly rare. Most of us are endlessly busy in the spinning wheel of life. Worrying about 3 meals a day is exhausting enough, so we find ourselves relentlessly pushed forward by society's pre-programmed script. Go to school, graduate, get a job, get married, have kids, send the kids to school, stay home to babysit the grandchildren, and die. We spend decades hustling just to maintain a basic line of existence. We think we have lived a full life, but it turns out we have only lived a half-life because we completely missed out on the poetic beauty of the other half. We have been eclipsed by an empty soul hiding inside our physical shells. Years ago, I had a friend in my hometown. She used to ride me on her bicycle across the open fields. She loved comparing the clouds in the sky to strange, magical shapes. She told me that one day she was going to be a writer. But now, whenever I talk to her, she only talks about her 2 teenage kids. She constantly complains about how busy her job is and how stressful money has become. When I returned to my hometown after studying abroad for many years and reunited with my high school friends, I couldn't tell if I was the one feeling alienated in the crowd or if my friends were slowly losing the other half of their lives. The topics of conversation, the anxieties, the life goals, they all revolved around the exact same things: children, spouses, the rising prices of real estate, and how expensive meat and vegetables have gotten at the market. Every single time. I even shared the story of Anne with some newly graduated college students, but their grimacing faces forced me to change the subject and recommend a book about the secrets of getting rich or how to boost productivity to outpace their peers. They didn't want to read a dreamy book that looked like it was meant for children. Even when the fascinating wonders of nature are right beside them, people refuse to look, believing it to be overly romantic, delusional, a waste of time, abnormal, and utterly impractical. If life loses its poetry, it acts like a blunt knife. It won't kill you instantly, but it will slowly, agonizingly brutalize your spirit. And a long time later, people will suddenly realize, even if there were no massive storms, even if you achieved material success, reached your desired goals, and perfectly completed the societal programming just like everyone else, with a boring soul, you will be utterly destroyed by your own monotonous days. Have you ever considered that the culprit behind all of this might just be you? If you don't open your heart, don't blame the sun for not coming in. If you don't immerse yourself in nature and the universe, if you fail to spot the poetic and fascinating details in everyday life, your existence will just be a barren wasteland. Sociologist Frederick once said, "Suffering, just like happiness, is simply a genuine feeling in the heart. The reason your life is boring is because you are living as an empty shell. An interesting soul can always see the rivers, the lakes, the mountains, and the seas. It can feel the poetry of the universe, even on the cloudiest, most stormy days. And no matter how difficult or distorted life becomes, those interesting things will circle back and heal you." If imagination is Anne's most prominent trait, it is also her survival mechanism. She told Matthew, after being abandoned time and time again in a desolate world, "If it wasn't for my imagination, I couldn't have kept living." A writer once noted that Anne possesses two incredibly precious treasures. First, a relentless wonder for life, and second, an overwhelmingly optimistic imagination. When Anne first arrives at the Avonlea train station, she chooses to wait outside rather than in the women's waiting room because there is more scope for imagination out there. When she sees a street intertwined with white flowers and cherry trees spilling over the curb, she instantly imagines a bride in a beautiful wedding dress with a delicate, thin veil. In the eyes of the Cuthbert siblings, the surrounding scenery is so incredibly familiar that it has become entirely mundane. But in Anne's eyes, it is as beautiful as a fairyland. She gives them magnificent names: the Lake of Shining Waters, the White Way of Delight, Lover's Lane, Birch Path, Violet Vale. Faced with a stiff, vintage dress lacking any refinement, Anne simply uses her imagination to redesign it. Her bedroom is brutally simple, but through her imagination, she hangs silk curtains and lays velvet carpets on the floor, transforming a freezing room into a poetic sanctuary. To Anne, the imperfect things in daily life can achieve absolute perfection through the mind. This kind of self-deception might seem ridiculous to the modern world, but in her heart, it is the ultimate secret to enjoying life. This is exactly what Francie's grandmother says in A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. Children need imagination, and imagination is priceless. No matter how brutal their lives become later, they will never be trapped by the blandness of everyday existence. But unfortunately, today's children are micromanaged by adults. If you ask who the busiest people on earth right now, it is probably our children. They wake up at the crack of dawn for school, spend their afternoons jumping between skill classes and tutoring, and spend their nights doing homework until midnight. Children have absolutely zero time left to develop their innate imagination, only to grow up into adults living with souls as barren as their parents. Anne's imagination doesn't just help her live happily and optimistically, it acts as a cure for everyone around her. The first is Matthew, a notoriously eccentric old man in Avonlea, sullen, slow, incredibly shy, and terrified of speaking to women. He drives his buggy to the train station to pick up an adopted boy, only to find a red-haired girl waiting. How could Matthew possibly break the news of this terrible mistake? However, Anne doesn't let him feel awkward. She chatters away. "I'm so glad to see you. I was beginning to think you weren't coming, and I was imagining all the things that might have happened. I had made up my mind that if you didn't come for me tonight, I'd go down the track to that big wild cherry tree and climb up into it to stay all night. I wouldn't be a bit afraid, sleeping in white blossoms in the moonlight. Wouldn't that be wonderfully romantic? Just like sleeping in a marble hall." This quirky little girl's imagination completely conquers Matthew, compelling him to take her home. With this little bird chirping beside him, Matthew's incredibly dull world suddenly becomes infinitely brighter. Then there is Marilla, a dry, strict, and hard-working woman who is incredibly difficult to please. At first, she refuses to keep Anne because she talks too much, but she quickly finds herself mesmerized by her vivid mind. When Anne furiously declares that the gossipy Rachel Lynde looks like a sandwich, Marilla has to suppress a laugh. She feels an unexpected spark of joy because no one has ever spoken to her with such vivid, imaginative words. Anne's metaphors literally melt her frozen heart. In Avonlea, the people drawn to Anne's heart are almost exclusively children, while the people who view her as an alien are the adults. To adults, imagination is trivial, nonsensical, and impractical. They're so accustomed to calculating everything carefully that they lose the ability to directly feel the beauty around them. When you read The Little Prince, you see exactly this phenomenon. Is it a hat, or is it a boa constrictor digesting a giant elephant? Why is the adult world always so devoid of imagination? Why do adults live such boring lives? We were all once children with simple wishes and pure hearts, but due to the anxieties and helplessness born from chasing practical interests, adults have paid a terrible price. So how do we make life just a little bit more interesting? Only by returning to our childhood, by looking at problems with the heart of a kid, will many impossible obstacles become easily solvable. Anne's imagination is the pure heart of childhood, forcing the rigid adults of Avonlea to finally discover the obvious beauty they ignore every single day, and in doing so, it begins to heal them. If imagination is her best trait, the vehicle delivering it is her pure heart, her love for people, and her profound gratitude for life. Before Green Gables, Anne suffered through 2 terrible adoptions. We can deeply feel the misery of her time with those families. But when Marilla asks, Anne speaks without a single ounce of resentment, only deep sympathy and gratitude. She has eyes that actively hunt for beauty. She catches the joy in life and grinds it into a medicine for every wounded soul. Because she is grateful for the gift of life, she fiercely guards her kindness and tries her absolute best to forgive all malice. She freely spreads her simplicity and enthusiasm to everyone. In Avonlea, Anne loves almost everyone, even those who treat her poorly. Even the plants and her surroundings receive her sincere affection. To Anne, the plants have precious lives, so she becomes best friends with the trees and the river. She praises them with the greatest love. Mark Twain once said, "Kindness is a language which the deaf can hear and the blind can see." Anne uses kindness to repay the life springing from the earth, and with an energy like spring rain, she turns the suffocating town of Avonlea into a vibrant, living place. Anne spends 5 years at Green Gables, filling her painful childhood with beautiful memories. Thanks to her relentless diligence, she gets into Queen's Academy and wins a prestigious scholarship. Many adult readers might think that things this perfect never last, that such a dreamy, interesting life must eventually face the crushing weight of reality. And they would be exactly right. Matthew, suffering from heart disease, passes away from a heart attack upon hearing the bank has gone bankrupt. The doctor warns Marilla that she must stop reading and sewing, or she will go completely blind. For the first time, Anne feels the agonizing pain of losing a loved one and the crushing weight of heavy responsibility on her shoulders. Ultimately, Anne makes a devastating choice. She gives up the scholarship. She gives up her massive opportunity to attend Redmond College. Instead, she chooses to become a teacher in Avonlea. She stays at Green Gables to accompany Marilla, read to her, and help with the chores. If going to university at Redmond was a straight, dream-filled highway, then staying in her hometown is a terrifying, obscured bend in the road. But facing this dark curve, Anne remains fiercely optimistic. She says, "I don't know what lies around the bend, but I'm going to believe that the best does." A person who loves life also loves the bends in the road. This girl, with an incredibly resilient and interesting soul, understands something profound. No one can avoid the curves life throws at us. Like a river in nature, no river flows perfectly straight. In the process of moving forward, we will always hit insurmountable obstacles. In life, those obstacles are failures, the brutal hardships of growing up. They are unavoidable. But it is precisely because of these fierce, crashing waves that life becomes majestic, granting us the most extraordinary experiences and lessons. Anne is an interesting soul, like a brilliantly colored rainbow. Mark Twain highly praised Anne, calling her the dearest and most moving and delightful child since the immortal Alice. When you read this story, you feel the magnificent words, but pay close attention. Behind them is not just a speaking pen, but a profound love for life embedded in an interesting soul. The message she leaves us is clear. Use kindness to feel the warmth of the world. Use imagination to heal the pessimism of reality. Immerse yourself in the poetry of the universe to truly savor the entirety of a human life. These are all the necessary elements you need to start living with an interesting soul. I hope both you and I can become these interesting souls, ensuring every single moment we live holds a bit of poetry, lighting up every dark bend in the road of our own lives. Thank you so much for listening. If you found value in this video, please share it with someone who needs it. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our deep dives every single week. What is one useless, beautiful thing in your life that you've been ignoring? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you again, and I will see you in the next video.